Hey guys, I don't know if you heard the latest Genshin news, but apparently Nod Krai is gonna save Genshin Impact. Alright, listen, jokes aside, we get these videos pretty much every single year at this point saying the next region is gonna save the game, right? Vaz made a video called The Future of Genshin Impact's Character Meta. Can version 6 units save the game? Now, I'm gonna keep it entirely a buck here. I really like Vaz. I think Vaz makes great content. But I'm gonna go into this with a very open mind because the thing is, as much as people like to say Genshin Impact's dead and this could save Genshin, this game is far from dead. It doesn't need reviving. It doesn't need saving. It just needs improvements. And I think most people, what most people want is improvements that the majority of the player base are gonna feel. Not just like teapot stuff and not just endgame stuff, but overall quality of life, overall big developments like character models and the way that people play the game and visualize the game, right? That's what I want from Nod Krai. I don't think Genshin's dead. I think Natlan was actually pretty good overall. Definitely not my favorite region. I still think Fontaine was better in my opinion. But listen, I'm getting kind of off track here. I'm excited to see what Vaz has to say because I feel like a lot of his takes are very level-headed. I'll give more thoughts as we get into the video, so let's take a look.
Version 6 has been confirmed a while back, and in a similar fashion to how they introduced most of the Natlan roster back in late version 4, in late version 5 we were acquainted with the key units of interest that will be arriving in Nod Krai.
Yes, okay, real quick, I do think, so here was my big thing, right? Sumeru we knew quite a bit about, and the characters, I was already very excited for Sino specifically. He was the only character in Sumeru that I pulled for constellations for, I think. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty certain. And I still really like Sino's kit, I do. I'm a sucker for it. For Fontaine, the characters they introduced in Fontaine hit me like a truck instantly, dude. I fucking loved Nuvalet. I loved, even, you might be surprised by this, even like Clarend and stuff, even though I didn't pull her on a first run. A lot of the characters in Fontaine and Sumeru I loved. Natlan did not hit me at all for the characters when they showed. I didn't instantly feel like a gravitational pull towards any of them. Now, Nod Krai, obviously, these are a lot of characters we've known a lot about for a very long time. I'm very excited for the characters of Nod Krai. There's a couple that I couldn't give two shits about. This one and Aino. I don't even know her name. I just don't really care about those two characters, but every other character I think looked phenomenal pretty much.
Interesting about the roster this time around is that unlike Natlan, where they brought in all originals, Nod Krai features a cast of newcomers like Nicole, Aino, Llama, and Never, in addition to characters we already knew of but were unsure as to when Hoyo would pull the trigger on Chekhov's gun, like Gallus, Colombina, Durin, Sandron, and Dad, who finally came back from the store, Varga. Plainly speaking, the difference in reception between the feature lineups of version 5 and 6 are practically night and day, which is a great look for Genshin Impact seeing as how divided the player base was in version 5. From what I can tell, the community is in a more...
to be fair, I do think Natlan divided the player base more than any other region. A lot of people love it, like think it's the best thing Genshin's ever given, and a lot of people hate it and think it's the worst. I think it falls somewhere in between. I think it falls on kind of a similar level to Sumeru for me. Fontaine was my favorite region. Mondstadt just... it gives you the nostalgic feeling, right? Liyue was pretty good for me. It introduced like Dainsleif stuff, I'm pretty sure, and it introduced a lot of new things into the game. The region itself I enjoyed. In Azuma, I loved the puzzles. The Archon Quest was lacking in a lot of areas. The storytelling and the story itself I felt like could have been a lot better, especially at this point in the game since we've gotten so much new stuff. So my top three is Sumeru, Fontaine, and Natlan. The lore that we got in Natlan was next level stuff. It really just fell short for me personally on the story presentation or storytelling, whatever you want to say, during the latter portions of the quest. But it was a lot of content and a lot of lore. Very happy with the lore from Natlan.
United front this time around in respect to characters, although a lot of that does have to do with us finally being able to see what Alice and Varga really look like.
God,
personally,
they look good,
the Grandmaster had a stubble at least, but you know what, I'll take Japar looking 20 years older. Anyways, we're not talking about
it's like Japar and Aventurine had a love child, dude, but I'm alright with... Varka looks pretty good, dude. He looks pretty good. Excited to see the in-game model. I hope they don't eat away fine, but we'll see.
Character designs though, at least not until later in version 6 if I ever need to. What I want to talk about today is the current state of Genshin's metagame based on the events that took place throughout version 5, what Hoyo should look to do, and what they should avoid. The game has reached a rather tenuous point.
So I assume this is going to touch on things like the Night Soul stuff and even the Numa Usia stuff.
As far as meta is concerned, especially now that we have endgame content. So I figure it's worth talking about. When Honkai Star Rail brought out Pure Fiction back in 1.6, people were pleasantly surprised to see 2 rotating endgame modes, contrasting from Genshin Impact having only 1. The difference in how Pure Fiction operated compared to Memory of Chaos was appreciated by characters who better excelled at clearing waves of enemies, allowing for the roster to reach a more balanced condition.
I do remember this. I think to be fair, I've never taken part in Honkai's endgame, which I'm very thankful for because I don't pull for every character. But yeah, I think one form of endgame was very single target orientated and another was very much AoE orientated, which I think is a good balance to have. My favorite is still the simulated universe. I just think it's fun.
Then when Apocalyptic Shadow came out, a greater focus was placed on boss killing, which originally was intended to help out the more single target focused characters, although a lot of good that did. Star Rail's abundance of
did that not do good? Wait, I'm surprised. Why did that not do good?
endgame content was often weaponized against Genshin to showcase the difference in quality between the sister titles, but a side effect of that became more and more apparent over the next year or so was how much of an incentive that would be for Hoyo to force out new releases containing noticeably higher power budgets than the existing cast, and how much we would be pressured to respond to that. Power creep and HP inflation have been serious points of contention for Star Rail, paired alongside the continuous 2 5-star release per version for almost every single version since 1.0.
This is why I'm very grateful that I don't take part in Honkai Star Rail Endgame. I'm thinking about making a video about Honkai Star Rail soon because, well, I'll save that for another time. But
it's been getting harder to ignore just how alarmingly quick units who were once considered top of the line to drop down to Tier 1, Tier 2, or even Tier 3 status. Why I'm bringing this up is because Genshin's current power scaling progression is beginning to follow a similar path. For the longest time ever, one of the game's shining virtues was how power creep resistant it was.
I disagree, dude. I don't even see it as power creep for Stygian Onslaught. I see it as just shilling to sell the current on-banner characters, which is the same thing that's always happened. It's always the on-banners, dude. It's like, for the hardest difficulties in Stygian, like the fucking dire difficulty and shit, like, if it's basically if you don't have the rate up characters, you're kind of screwed. Like, even people that have got C6 of other characters are going to struggle because a lot of the bosses are literally selected in the buffs and debuffs for the current on-banner characters.
Throughout the first half of its timeline, there were several units in version 1 who were still top tier if not best in slot, even in version 3 and 4. But the main reason behind that, at least in my opinion, was not because characters have been aging well or because new units weren't that much better than old ones. It was a combination of 2 factors. One, up until only recently there was enough room for units to get in bed with each other even if a new unit came out that may initially appear to challenge their position. The most noteworthy example would be when Yelan came out. People thought she would be the one to knock Xingqiu out of relevance by superseding him, but
I never even thought, I just thought she was going to be Xingqiu 2.0, which she basically is, right? I mean, sure, she does a little bit better than him in a lot of situations, but he's still a better Hydro applicator.
Thanks to most teams consisting of 3 supports and 1 DPS, players simply went about the idea of just putting them together and shove someone else out instead. The functional differences also aided in better distinguishing one character from another, in this case Yelan being more damage-oriented while Xingqiu was more reaction-centric.
Exactly.
It took an exceedingly long time for enough characters to come out to where support would have to worry about losing the seat at the table since
there is a lot of characters in Genshin now as well, to be fair, which I think, I actually think Vaz made another video about that. Maybe we'll give that a watch, but I don't really know if the amount of characters is a problem within itself, or if it's just the way that characters work with each other now.
So it's a sufficient enough buffer in between those points. But with the game now crossing over 100 playable units, there are multiple options for a party that all equally contend with each other, explaining why recent characters have considerably higher power budgets than older ones. Here's another way to explain it. Picture the gold standard of power boosting being Bennett. Broadly speaking, all supports concerned with augmenting their DPS's own power were being compared against him. The next one that came out would be give or take Kazuha, whose main competition was Bennett. Then the next hypercarry DPS support to be released was Yelan, who had to compare against Kazuha and Bennett. In this hypothetical team, neither Kazuha nor Yelan posed a threat to Bennett, or any support.
Funny thing is as well, though, even if you don't put a DPS in that team, it'll probably still shred the majority of content back then.
Was market share because all of them could comfortably work together. But then we started getting more supports like Farina, Silali, Shilonen, Yansan, and so on.
I feel like Farina was the beginning of the end for supports in this game, bro. I ain't even gonna cap. Like, she basically, I mean, sure, Kazu also pretty much buffs anyone, but bro, Farina is like game-changing power levels for a lot of teams, especially with certain artifact combinations, right?
And so forth. At the same time, there's still only 3 spots in this proverbial game of musical chairs. Subsequently, Hoyo's trying to give more power to new characters because the amount of indirect competition is growing.
You also kind of have to give more power to newer characters because there's you never want to be in the Dea situation again, right? Where you release a brand new character and they're miles below what current characters are, because then the incentive to pull them is a net negative, basically. There's almost no reason other than really liking the character or liking the design.
Sure, off-field Mavuika and Yelan are far from in the same niche, but if the overall goal is to power up your team's DPS, then one way or another, they do have to compete against each other.
Yep.
In that sense, the entire roster now has to fight for the same 4, 8, 12 party slots you actively use when taking on endgame content. Version 4 saw a noticeable jump in power for the average cast member to account for the expectations being higher than back in versions 1, 2, and 3. Version 5 saw an even bigger one, with the number of quote-unquote garbage units being far lower in frequency.
Is Mizuki that bad? I thought Mizuki was actually pretty decent. But correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know. I pulled her, but, well, I lost 50-50 for her.
Like every noteworthy character was top tier. These heightened expectations will have to escalate even more to continue the ever-growing incentive to pull for more characters. 2. There was no content that forced players to min-max or prioritize efficiency. Up until Spiral Abyss began to get more stringent on who you could bring for a comfortable floor 12 9-star clear, and up until the release of Imaginarium Theater and Stygian Onslaught, the barrier to completion was generously lax.
This is a hot take. I think Imaginarium Theater is the most quote-unquote fun endgame Hoyo currently have. I think Stygian just feels like Spiral Abyss again, but with harder metrics to hit. But Imaginarium Theater, just the subtle restrictiveness that it has on the characters for people that have played the game for quite a while and have a lot of characters built, just makes it slightly more interesting. It's still not the best. It's not God's graces to endgame, right? But I think compared to the other two, it kind of stands out a little bit, especially with the rewards and the keys and then the trails behind the characters that are permanent. I think it's the most fun for me.
As in, you could run a suboptimal 80% strength team and still net results. Objective power creep only applies if content accelerates in challenge and difficulty at a commensurate rate to your characters getting stronger. Even if there's relative power creep like Linny eclipsing Yoimiya, practically speaking they have the same pull value if Yoimiya has no trouble clearing the content.
I'll keep it a buck as well, bro. I fucking despise Linny's playstyle. It's so slow and boring to me. Maybe I play him wrong. I've tried playing him right, though, and I just don't like it. I like Yoi's because it's pretty fast-paced. I enjoy playing Yoimiya.
Linny could do it faster, but that's a moot point. He could be 10 times the strength of Yoimiya for all the difference it made.
Yep.
Though it took an incredibly long time to do so, endgame content has started to get more and more difficult. Whether it's a healthy form of challenge or mindless uncreative HP inflation, Spiral Abyss and by extension the other two endgames are beginning to get more taxing on how well invested your units are, both horizontally and vertically. The end result being, personal preference aside, it's getting increasingly more difficult to find a reason to play units who aren't at the upper tiers because the margin for error is becoming less forgiving.
I think a lot of that is also to do with the power systems in the game, though, and not necessarily how much damage the characters can do, right? It's like the Numa Usia stuff and the Natlan Phlogiston stuff, like having to use the... oh my god, I can't remember the name, bro. You know what I mean? The frickin' awakened state to like for the papilla, right? You gotta use the Natlan specific mechanic to be able to break the shield. So you don't have to, but it's far easier.
As of late, Spiral Abyss has gotten more specific, placing emphasis on you to play into whatever cycle blessing is at work, since chambers are now being balanced around that cycle blessing being obligatory, not a luxury.
And again, the cycle blessing is there to sell the on-banner characters. That's the way it's always been and pretty much always will be.
As well, Imaginarium Theater forces you to have a wide variety of units of every single element
That's
at
why
least
I like
somewhat invested in to account for whatever combination of 3 elements will be usable during that time.
Yep.
Then they have to be decently strong enough to allow for some creative latitude in brute forcing through enemies in the more than likely event you're stuck with a mismatch of
because who the fuck is using Ganyu and Hu Tao outside of this in the same team?
random units without any inherent synergy. Naturally, having strong characters built up can get you through that. Then of course, Stygian Onslaught, with an excruciatingly short timer and bosses HP inflated to high.
Are these the new bosses? I haven't even seen it yet. Holy fuck, bro. It's the tortoise, the papilla, and...
Heaven, we now have our first instance
And the... Oh my god, dude.
of
Jesus.
content
Okay.
where a sizable portion of the roster just straight up cannot reasonably complete it.
That's
For the
crazy.
first time in Genshin Impact history, there's indeed
How are people feeling about the new Stygian? Is there any videos I should watch about that? Because I'll give it a try, but goddamn.
a hard cutoff point between viable and unviable. Spiral Abyss could be brute forced to an extent, but for Stygian, even Dolphin players can have trouble.
Yep.
These two factors bring us to where Genshin Impact is now.
But that's what I'm saying, dude. Even whales can have trouble. Whales who pull for like C6 R5s of a lot of characters, but not all characters, right? Because again, if you don't have the specific characters, you're kind of screwed for the highest tier rewards.
The roster is sufficiently saturated to where opportunity cost begins to matter a lot more in determining who to pull for. Meanwhile, endgame content has started to become a legitimate challenge, consequently leading to there being more pressure to keep up with the new units. Hoyo's aware of this, demonstrated by them making new units decidedly stronger by a measurable length than those who came before. The number of version 1 and 2 characters who can still be considered top tier has substantially decreased, and though some of them did catch a second win,
I think Ayaka was actually really good for the Stygian last time, right? For the Cryo boss?
namely the Cryo DPS units by virtue of Escoffier, there is now a far more conspicuous discrepancy in power between the new generation of characters and the old, to the point where direct buffs aside, older units are becoming hyper-dependent on specific new ones to essentially carry them back into relevance.
That's also true.
What does this have to do with version 6 characters? My hope is that Hoyo deeply reflects on the events that transpired throughout version 5 in the scope of gameplay. No matter your stance on the subject, I think we can all agree that Natlan caused considerable damage to Genshin's reputation in a number of ways. The narrative dissonance people felt towards Natlan character design and the strange choices they made in the story are often the main points of contention. But
I think the weak story writing is kind of crazy though. I think the writing was good. The execution, yeah, sure. I have my own critiques about the execution again with story presentation, storytelling, but when people say writing, I think of the lore and the actual like background of the story, and I thought for Natlan it was actually very good in progressing the main storyline. Could it have been better? Sure, things can always be better, but I don't think it was the worst Genshin's ever seen.
But gameplay execution would be partly to blame as well, which is a shame given that
I think Not Cry is going to have its own version of Night Soul shit, bro. I'm just going to put it out there. I think it's guaranteed. I think the moon stuff, the lunar reactions and stuff are going to be quite similar.
And in the 5.0 special program, holy shit, that was a year ago?
Jesus.
They mentioned all sorts of quality of life updates and improvements to the game, only for most of that to be shoved under the rug. What I'm referring to is the notion of Natlan units having Natlan-specific mechanics that force you to pair other Natlan units together, artificially nerfing existing units in the process.
Yeah.
A lot of people were unhappy about that, especially free-to-plays who flat out did not possess the wherewithal to pull for so many characters.
Yeah, bro, I mean, we had a taste of it in Fontaine with the Numa Usia stuff, a small taste, but Natlan definitely took it up an extra notch.
I get why Hoyo did it. It sort of amends the musical chairs issue by creating a new set of chairs, and as a side tangent, I actually really liked how in Pokemon Black and White we could only play with new Pokemon, but in Black and White you could get access to all Gen 5 Pokemon for the very affordable price of $35 back in 2011. $35 can't even get you a Natlan 4-star character without a bit of luck, much less a 5-star.
No, it can't.
Because of that saying, Hoyo will most likely have some kind of region-specific gimmick for Nodcry, and they even have a thematic incentive to do so. But if you're watching this, Hoyo, please do not implement this in a way that excludes current units. It's blatantly predatory and will only further exacerbate the player base's already rapidly diminishing goodwill towards Genshin.
I'd like to hear a way that they could implement it without diminishing old units, because so far what we've seen is that, right? We've seen the lunar charge reaction stuff, but that doesn't necessarily diminish older units because it's not as restrictive as Night Soul stuff. You don't have to use other Nodcry units to be able to trigger those lunar blessings. The lunar, not lunar blessings, that's fucking Spiral Abyss. The lunar charge reactions. Like, you could use an Ever with Mondstadt characters and still trigger the reactions, is what I'm saying, right? So I think that is not the worst way to implement it, for sure. I don't think it's going to be as restrictive as Natlan.
For the majority of Natlan units, players could rationalize their decision to skip a unit because they couldn't be bothered to pull for the other teammates, seeing as a lot of people didn't resonate with Natlan units all that much to begin with. But it would be a huge mistake for them to pull a Skirk or Mavuika for characters like Alice, Columbina, Varka, and Sandron, who had staunchly fervent fan bases for years.
True.
They're bound to be strong units, but please do so in a manner that makes them accessible, not restrictive.
I do think Nodcry is gonna err along the side of caution with being more accessible and not restrictive like Natlan was.
For that matter, there's the further question of power creep. If version 5 was the biggest collective leap in strength from version to version thus far, I can only imagine version 6 will be even more so. The past 2 years have been mostly hypercarry focused, which is all good and well, mind you. Not every unit needs to play towards a certain reaction. But the one downside of releasing a bunch of hypercarries is that the main appeal they have is big numbers, accelerating the rate of power creep when damage is the only metric for comparison. There are a few ways they can navigate this to still make exciting units without necessarily having to push the needle too much. Personally, I wouldn't mind if they went back to elemental reactions for a time. Just recently, with the advent of
Well, I think that's what they are doing. Was this video before this was 18 hours ago, so no, this... Okay,
Benepa, they made a new elemental reaction, marking the first time since Dendro that we've gotten one. I mean, technically it's a conversion of an existing reaction like Nilu's Bountiful Course, not a universal one, but we still have a number of different reactions we can work towards that haven't been explored yet, for example Geo and Dendro, or Arrow and Geo.
I'm not getting my hopes up, bro. I'm not. I refuse. I refuse to get my hopes up for new elemental reactions that weren't already existing and just amplified. It would be a great thing, don't get me wrong. I don't expect it in the slightest, though.
You could create triple reactions like how they did for Bloom, where you can apply Pyro or Electro for Virgin and Hyper Bloom respectively. I suppose you can argue that in and of itself can be a form of power creep, but in this case it affects the entire roster evenly. Perhaps they can make Alice dabble into a more advanced Pyro elemental reaction, while Varga can do...
As long as they make her hat catch fire and make that hat design awesome as fuck. I mean, I already like the hat design with it being open and stuff, but it does look like it's meant to have cloth in between. But if that turns out to be flames, I'm so down for that,
an
bro.
extra Animo reaction. They just have to do so in a way that's accommodating.
Well, we also had the Imaginarium Theater reaction, right? We had the Imaginarium Theater reaction with, what was it? Fucking Dendro, Cryo, and Electro. I think that could also be cool if brought into the Nod Cry character kits and then brought into every character at that
for
point.
Many units, so that we don't get another Escalier all over again. Although thinking about that doesn't really address the underlying issue of there being simply too many units, that newer units have to do something extravagant for us to be interested in them. Understandably, Hoyo will make version 6 units powerful to encourage us to pull for them. Designing more elemental reactions may allow for the game to be more interesting, but they're still going to find some way for non-Cry units to be the best at utilizing them. The goal though is to do it in a way where old characters get reinforced by their addition, not rendered obsolete by it. Something that could work is to breathe new life into old concepts too, like revisiting mono-elemental teams. We have a couple quasi-mono-element teams like Linny and Mono-Hydro, but something like a Mono-Electro team, Mono-Animo team, and whatnot could be worth checking out as well. That way...
I think, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like Mono Pyro is already a thing, right? Especially with Arlecchino. I think I use her in Mono Pyro, but... In terms of other what other good mono pyro team or like mono teams are there that are straight up just mono, one element?
It can lead to a high-performing unit that also brings more interest back to older characters. I believe Llama and Nefer are both Dendro, which is exciting because Dendro hasn't seen any attention in a while. Varga being a mono Animo driver could give us an excuse to run teams like Sucrose, Lanyan, and Mizuki. More expansions into the mono pyro team.
I feel like there's certain elements that just don't really make too much sense to be mono though, right? Like the whole game's vision for combat is the elemental reaction system. I would much rather than make more mechanics. I sound like a fucking broken record, I'm very aware. Where certain elemental reactions are definitely not even forced, but benefited. Even forced, actually, for some certain stuff, I think it'd be fine. As long as they give enough free units to be able to trigger the certain reactions, I think that's a net positive for mechanic based systems in the game. But like mono teams would definitely be fun, but also I understand why they're not as popular. I do get it.
With Alice and Duran might be worth consideration as well. Or better yet, let's bring back physical damage. I get that physical and mono element teams kind of go against the central theme of Genshin.
Okay, there we go. Never mind.
Mixing and matching elements. But this video is meant to be theory crafting on how they can design version 6 units to be appealing without forcing players to pull for all of them or making them mandatory for clearing the game's content.
Fair.
I suppose the mayor is talking about that too, given the visceral excitement players have towards the number of characters being released in version 6, or you could take advantage of that momentum by improving more aspects of the game to paint a very clear intent that version 6 is a major turning point for Genshin.
Yeah, it's a major turning point. Again, I don't really like the whole, Nod Cry is going to save Genshin, but I do like the idea that Nod Cry is going to be, hopefully, by far the best patch cycle that Genshin have ever had. I think they have the foundation there for it already. It is literally just about how it's executed at this point.
Again, in light of the controversial reception of Natlan and the festering lack of meaningful change to the game's experience, they could build off of what they did right in version 5, like adding more quality of life, more in-game content, and so on to really transform Genshin Impact's experience.
For sure.
A more strategic endgame would be nice. We have Spiral Abyss being the general one, Imaginarium Theater being the horizontal investment one, Stygian Onslaught being the vertical investment one, but maybe some other endgame modes that aren't boss rushes, like a defense mission for example, where sustain and crowd control matter more than DPS. Really anything that rewards creativity.
Yeah, creativity and mechanics. I need some form of, like, like the current Genshin endgame is just not for me. It's not made for me. It's not designed for people that like what I enjoy in mind. I would like there to be endgame where that is the case. Do I have faith that it'll be added? I honestly don't know at this point. I'm kind of just holding out hope more so for the community endgame stuff in the UGC, user generated content modes.
The overpower would be a great addition to Genshin and a way to manage power creep.
Yep.
Basically, what I'm trying to say is that version 6 is an opportunity for Hoyo to capitalize on paying off the build-up of so many highly anticipated characters.
How excited are y'all for 6.x?
To do something uncharacteristic of them that sends a message to players that things will change for the better.
Yep.
Nonline did a few things right, I'll give him that, but it also made a lot of things worse. From gameplay to characters, Krai has the best shot at restoring interest to the game.
Agreed.
Narratively, this is arguably the most excited players have been in a very long time, which means if they stick the landing here, that would really turn things around for
They gotta stick the landing, bro. They got it. They've hyped this shit up more than any other region, dude. They have to stick the landing. They've got to be so confident at this point. They have to. Oh my god, I'm losing words. They have to.
But they have to do so in a way that's considerate towards all types of players.
Yeah.
Releasing a bunch of overpowered units and then spiking HP inflation to punish people for not pulling them is obviously not the way they should go about it.
True.
As for how they should, that's where it gets tough. The current circumstances are making it very difficult for Genshin to find a win-win situation, where the company still gets to generate.
There will never be a win-win where everybody is happy. That's what people need to realize, and I have realized that. I would just like a situation where I am happy with it. It's greedy, I know it is, but yeah. That's
Revenue and sell units, while the player base feels like their time and money aren't being respected. One thing I know for sure though, well-designed and engaging character gameplay can be a good starting point. What about you guys? How do you think Hoyo should go about version 6 in characters, gameplay, and systems to fix up Genshin? You're welcome to share in the comments down below. That's it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated.
I honestly think the way that they're currently going about it, or the way that it looks like they're going about it, is the best way to do it, where the new reactions are going to bolster the entire roster of Genshin characters. I think that's a good thing. However, it doesn't fix the fact that it's probably just going to be damage checks and hyperinflated HP enemies, right? Because all we've seen so far is new reaction systems that are just a development on old ones, but all it does is more damage. There's definitely ways they could implement things to certain bosses and certain enemies that make it so that you have to use certain elements to trigger certain effects and stuff like that, which would be good. And then different forms of endgame, different modes and everything, with mechanics in mind, kind of like MMO raid style stuff, right? Where you have to maybe kite the boss to a certain area and trigger certain reactions to freeze it in place, or burn it, or do damage over time, or be able to heal yourself, things like that. I do have faith that Krai is going to be able to fix a lot of the things that Natlan did worse than other regions, but let me know down in the comments as well. What do you all think? Make sure you go check out Vars as well, link down in the description below, and subscribe so you don't miss any future content.